Today I'd like to try something different. I'd like to talk about a book I recently read. And don't worry, I'm working on more board game mod videos too. So if you're only interested in that type of content, I'll have more of those videos coming soon. But anyway, I'm a fan of science fiction, any great story really. And up until recently, I'd only ever heard people talk about a book called Neuromancer by William Gibson. And this is first published in 1984. I love the 1980s too. So how could I not read this one eventually? I finished it recently and wanted to talk about it, mainly because I want to know what other people think. And I know it's considered a classic in the cyberpunk subgenre of science fiction. The question is, just how good is it really? Would you put it in your top 10 books of all time? For instance, would you say it's in your top 10 science fiction stories of all time at least? And that's a tough question for me. Firstly, I do recommend it. I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. There's a lot of cool things in it. But I would say there are enough little things also about it that forced me to consider it to be an honorable mention at least. Maybe just outside an all-time great list of books that I've read, even in the science fiction genre. So what I'm about to discuss won't include massive spoilers. If you haven't read it, there'll be teasers maybe, so I can actually talk about certain things that I found interesting. So to begin with, the book has a great first chapter. I read it and I was just like, wow, this is going to be awesome. It describes a futuristic, dystopian, Blade Runner-esque crime-ridden urban corporate hellscape in such a visceral way with rampant drug use and hopelessness. It's just the absolute underbelly of society that the anti-hero of the story is stuck in. And the author can just describe that life in such a compelling way. It's just great, honestly. Unfortunately, I think the story as it wears on never is as consistently awesome as it is at the very beginning, if that makes sense. So had the whole thing played out in the punk and pimp infested streets of dystopian Chiba, Japan, or wherever, I probably would have liked it better, or at least found it more relatable or understandable. Instead, we get complete resets of scenery and lifestyle. So that's the story. Okay, but we go from main character as drug addicted loser almost in a total tailspin. So like a jet setting James Bond figure for a while, and then eventually some space station Zero G 2001 Space Odyssey or Moonraker type thing going on. So that was unexpected. At least we can say, well, we can all probably agree that Neuromancer is never truly predictable. So that's a plus. The two main protagonist characters are the coolest characters in the book. I think the Molly Millions or Razor Girl might even upstage or overshadow Case, who's our flawed Clint Eastwood type man of few words, anti-hero computer hacker. So yeah, Molly is more of a real actor in the physical realm anyway. The main antagonist isn't exactly a real person, so that's different. And its cat's paw in the actual world is basically a shell of person. So we don't really have a fully comprehensible villain throughout the story, in my opinion. There's also a weird Peter Rivera character who is straight up bizarre, and I really didn't know what to make of him. And I was wondering what you guys thought. Like, those of you who have read it, to me, he doesn't seem to fit all that well. And his special abilities don't feel congruent with other things described by the author. I found the character to be by far my least favorite in the book. On the other hand, I have to mention something that really impressed me. And that's before I go any further. And this is the way Gibson had the AI interact with Case, the main character, in cyberspace on a mental level. by hijacking and embodying Case's memories of actual people from prior events described earlier in the book. And I know it sounds weird. It is. But you get a few really jarring timeline reversals in the story that are outrageously cool WTF, oh snap moments. And I've never really seen this done before, not quite like this, in a sci-fi novel. So I found those moments probably to be the most fascinating aspects of Neuromancer. The problem is those moments don't culminate with like a home run conclusion. And the book's finale I found to be a tad underwhelming, especially when compared with how well the story is set up. The meaning of the title is all right. The way it's explained is okay. However, this day and age, it wouldn't be considered that big a deal. And what happens, I mean, how everything plays out in the end is just, it's okay. The ending does try to be punchy, but it's once again, it's okay. The best ending to a novel that I've ever read by comparison is in Moby Dick. Now that is a punchy ending, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a classic. In film, maybe you would have, I don't know, RoboCop, the first one, punchy, effective ending that it makes you say, all right. You read Neuromancer at the very end and just say, oh, all right. So what I'm trying to say is, for me, you start the book at 100 and finish at an 80. And I know there are people out there that absolutely love this book. I love parts of it. But you have to ask yourself, if it's so good, why has it never been turned into a movie? How come there's no TV series, for example? Too cerebral? I think you need a different ending. Would you make the AI become omnipotent at the end? I'm not sure. In fact, I don't even think it could be done. In 1984, the computer graphics were polygons when Gibson wrote this, and that's why the cyberspace renderings in Neuromancer, they seem abstract by today's standards, and you'd have to ask yourself, would a modern audience go for that? Would purists go nuts if a modern film rendition of the book turned into something more like Tron or The Matrix? So I don't know about that either. You'd have to find someone to play Molly, Millions, and Case, so I'm not sure who you would get to do that. And they were young in the book, like 25, and most leading men these days in movies are much older than that. Same with women, I suppose. So in conclusion, I think the best conversations to be had with respect to Neuromancer are the ones where you argue or debate with your friends about whether or not it makes an all-time great list, science fiction or otherwise. So I would like to ask you, is it in your top 10 list? It's good enough for me that it's right there. If it's not in, it's close. So I recommend Neuromancer, especially if you like science fiction. I recommend, it would be rated R, maybe. There's some sex parts, nothing gratuitous. Violence, yes. Not overly gratuitous. And also, don't bother with audiobook versions. There's too much computer lingo and jargon, jive speak, that would leave you hanging and confused. I actually did try this while I was at work once, and I was just missing parts and, wanting to go back and re-listen to stuff. And there's also, I never made it this far, but there's Jamaican patois spoken in it. So unless someone's actually speaks it, I mean, it would sound completely ridiculous read by a computer or a cheesy actor. So go out and actually get a copy. I want to get a first edition copy someday because the original cover art looks so cool. But anyway, please feel free to share some of your thoughts on Neuromancer in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more content coming soon.